You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
All right, hello, and welcome to a new episode of Cemetery Confessions. This month, we're going to be talking about materialism in goth culture. We're going to be reviewing the new album from French band Dead Astropilots. I've got some follow-up on Second Life. We've got some listener feedback. For my Sinister Suggestion, I'm going to be talking about paganism and Wicca, which might seem like an odd thing for an atheist to talk about. And we've got a lot more coming up. So, as always, I am the Count, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hello there.
And it's just us today, hearkening back
kicking
to...
it old school.
Yeah, episode 1. Like, I think the only episode that was a two-person show, but... We're going to get
That's
into
not
it.
even in the
We're gonna
archives anymore, is it?
No. Oh, no. It was awful. Hopefully that's not how this episode's going to be.
Yeah. we might be downgrading in quality a bit.
Yeah. I can. If anybody wants to hear that episode, send an email to cemeteryconfessions@gmail.com. And I will
also send money, and maybe we'll think about it.
Yeah, it's bad. There's no reason to listen to that. All right, it's time for the news.
If this boy did this, and the gothic, stuff that went around it, and the motive and everything, don't we all sort of want to know, that could be our teenager, that could be our kid doing that. How could that possibly happen?
Being described as being involved with the goth movement, but what exactly is that? We kind of know it when we see it, but some aspects of a goth lifestyle could they provoke such a murder?
All right, so this article is called The Commercialization of Goth Part 1, Halls and Materialism. And I'm going to be pulling out excerpts from this article. It's pretty lengthy, but I wanted to get kind of the juicier bits. If you want to read the entire thing, I'll have a link to it in the show notes. So we're going to start in paragraph 3, and they say, considered the height, and we're talking about YouTube here, considered the height of capitalist ideals. The question is really whether or not YouTube halls are stripping away goths' original DIY culture. Provoking more backlash than Hot Topic, exposing one's extensive shopping list has become a taboo of sorts among those who wish to maintain, however you might define the subculture's purity. Take a glimpse at any hashtag goth on Pinterest, Tumblr, and even Twitter, which ignited the hashtag goth tag so that actual goths could recognize each other.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. But I don't do Twitter anymore, so. You'll find that it has mostly become a trend of sorts. Models in black clothing, flawless makeup by non-goths who simply want to look the label, ripped jeans equal punk. If you don't know the type, some use goth looks as a means of attracting subscribers without knowing that it was a music-based subculture. When I say this, I'm speaking of tags, hashtag goth on image-based platforms like Pinterest and Tumblr. So the first thing to grab there is capitalism. They don't actually talk about capitalism through the rest of the article. Well, they talk about lower class and upper class a bit. But it's interesting to me. Do you think, we talk about the internet a lot. Do you think that the sort of capitalistic materialism in mainstream culture is driving this kind of behavior and like getting rid of the DIY roots, or is that an overstatement?
As far as like what's actually driving the behavior, I think part of it is just, I think it's more the social media culture that we're in more than necessarily capitalism. I think people want attention, and people gravitating toward looks that are, I guess, more extreme, and goth has always been kind of extreme in its look. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's completely about getting attention, but It mostly is. I mean, if you look at Instagram and Pinterest and Tumblr, it's all about just trying to get more eyes on you.
Yeah, and funny enough, actually, since you mentioned that, I've been, and more on this at the end of the show, so stick around. But I've been watching a lot of videos and looking at different media platforms in regards to paganism and Wicca. And it was interesting to me, kind of by way of comparison to Goth, because I'm not really involved with many other subcultures other than maybe nerd culture, but I don't have a community of people that I kind of interact around that with. So,
Right.
but what I've been seeing, and I've mostly been looking at YouTube, Instagram a little bit, and then Amino, because I had the Gothic Amino, and I was like, oh, look, there's a pagan one too. And what
Right.
I'm seeing a lot of is the same kind of thing we're seeing on those platforms with Goth. There's a lot of young, attractive women, mostly women, who have a very specific look that you could kind of classify as like earthy or witchy kind of thing. You know,
Right.
dyed hair, kind of hippie-ish, but still kind of cool and edgy. And they're sharing a lot of photos and videos of their altars and rituals. And you can tell that like this stuff is made up to be aesthetically pleasing. And they talk about, you know, the religion and how you do things and stuff like that. But it seems like there's a disconnect between people who have been doing this for a long time and that are older, or, you know, aren't Instagram models or whatever, having an emphasis on when they're teaching other people on the substance, on the sort of underlying philosophy and religion and that kind of thing. And it seems like the more trendy Wicca YouTubers and things like that, while they do touch on that stuff, and it's certainly there, it seems like it takes more of a backstage to the look of it. Which
Do they do haul videos, like
oh yeah,
altar hauls?
yeah, they have their own all manner of box subscription. Everything has a box subscription these days, so
Wow.
there's all kinds of stuff like that. But it's interesting that kind of does relate to what you were saying, is that it might just be a byproduct of the platform that it's on, and that certain people are drawn to certain platforms.
Yeah.
I don't know, but the capitalism thing is interesting. I think you have to. You can't go one way or the other with it. You can't be like all hail capitalism, but you can't also say Goth is only about DIY, because there's always been an element of buying stuff, supporting the scene through your purchases, and you know, consuming
Yeah.
or representing your lifestyle through consumption to a degree. But I think there has to be a balance there. I'm not sure I see capitalism kind of taking over Goth, unless you want to count.
It's like you
Go
can't
ahead.
even say that it's like taking it over, because it's we live in a capitalist culture. We always
Right.
have, so it's
Yeah.
kind of always been ingrained.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah. Yeah, and I wonder how that might relate to Goths in other countries as well.
Yeah.
But that's a survey for another time, I guess. So they go on by saying, by definition, a haul is a quantity of something that was stolen or is possessed illegally. We have since dropped its original meaning to designate a large quantity of stuff. Companies use self-proclaimed Goths to advertise an aesthetic. The fear people experience due to hauls comes from its lack of substance, i.e. forgetting its musical base, DIY culture, and other practices. So when sending Goth influencers clothes, associated accessories, and whatnot, there is the expectation that they will give positive reviews in order to establish a relationship with the brand and keep obtaining products.
Yeah, and I wish I seriously doubt that those YouTubers will be like, well, this product fucking sucks, because they want their
Yeah.
free shit. So
Yeah.
it's kind of inherently dishonest.
It was refreshing. This kind of came up tangentially, I think, when I Die You Die was on. We were talking about something else, or maybe when I was on their show, I don't remember. But it was this idea that it's like, okay, let's be honest here. You can say, well, first of all, I mean, you should say what was sent to you for free.
Yeah.
But to say that I got this for free and this is my honest opinion is pretty disingenuous. I mean, I don't think anyone really believes that. Of course,
Right.
you can say, oh, this could have been done better, or that could have been, but no one's really going to say anything really negative for those reasons. And I think it's pretty see-through when people say, oh, this is my honest opinion.
Yeah, and just like even if it does completely suck and the YouTuber knows that it sucks,
Yeah.
it's almost as like they don't really want to hurt the company's feelings because they sent this free shitty product and you don't want to be mean.
Well, and especially the more expensive something is,
Yeah.
the less likely you'll be to be realistic about it, because it kind of plays into that, I guess, psychological social contract. Like, I did something for you, and so now you should feel obligated to do something for me, kind of thing.
Right.
And that's going to be there whether you realize it or not. Another thing that bothers me about hauls, and they talk about the 3 different types of hauls. I'm just going to cover those briefly. But a lot of what I see is the even as a review, they don't really work. Because for me, when you do a review, you talk about the company, you talk about the history, you talk about the product quality, the cost value benefit, the longevity of the thing, the durability, depending on what it is, the delivery method, the themes of the product, or relevancy to other stuff and culture and blah blah blah, so on and so on. And none of that stuff ever really comes up. They don't go into any depth in any kind of journalistic sense as what you would expect of a review. It's basically it. And I think that's why some people feel jaded about it, is that it feels like they're saying, look at all this free shit I got. And then, sometimes the viewer is just left like, well, I'm poor. I can't buy any of that.
Nobody's sending me free shit, so,
but
why should I care?
I think a lot of that could be remedied if there was an effort put into something other than how the product looks, to really kind of talk. I could go on for days about the kind of topics you could go in depth on for various, even just clothing. And it bugs me. There's no effort there other than looking good.
Right.
So the author says, I've noticed there's 3 different types of hauls. The brand hauls, which is the person buys and receives products to review. These reviews generally consist of try-ons and basic information, how the piece fits and feels. Sometimes this is a dialogue of sorts, a way of interacting with fans. Informative hauls, the person primarily purchases their own products while occasionally receiving content from brands. They review the product in detail with the intentions of telling audiences which pieces are of better quality and worth purchasing. And the review product in detail thing, I think part of the problem is that a lot of these like lifestyle YouTubers they're just, I don't want to be a dick, but they end up being pretty people, just kind of like pretty people with no background in anything other than maybe like clothing or whatever.
Maybe marketing, who knows?
And there's marketing, but it ends up like there's a lot of pomp and circumstance but no substance behind it, and that's what bothers me. Like, you can make stuff look good, but have something interesting to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, what I would like to see is like DIY hauls, and I think that's touched here, like with thrift hauls. Just like buying hauls. Really cheap shit and teaching us how to use it in really cool ways.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there are certain YouTubers that do that, and I love those. I think those are great. Those are useful. You can it's something you can do yourself and that you can afford. Yeah. And you can put your own spin on it instead of saying, oh, cool, I'm going to buy this Killstar outfit that, 100 other people just bought after they watched this video kind of thing.
Right.
They say a YouTuber going by the Goblin Queen briefly touched upon Halls in a chat with Tabitha Lessick and mentioned an intriguing fact. She stated that goth YouTubers get significantly more views with Halls than any other videos. This attracts an audience and helps them grow a bigger fan base. Keeping this in mind, it seems that Halls have the potential to be promotional. In this case, critiquing the relationship between Halls and materialism becomes slightly more complex. I think that's potentially a reason. I think a lot of it does come down to these YouTubers are personas and
I guess they're getting like ad-based revenue, so they want to get as many fans as possible.
And I think I think maybe the reason why those videos get more views is because they attract non-goths. So you get like, I don't know, creepy dudes or
dudes who want to see the girl with the tits.
Yeah, or like, mall goth, whatever the modern equivalent of mall goths are, the, kind of baby bats and or people outside of the culture who just kind of want to look the part.
Mountain Dew's pretty cult, right?
Yeah, oh my God. Oh man, I watched that video a million times.
Me too. I want to know who that is, and I want her to be a guest on this show.
Oh God. Yeah, and part of that is, and that's part of the thing that I think playing into this materialism thing is what bothers some people, is that I think behind the scenes, these videos that get higher traffic aren't goths, and I think that what happens is the YouTubers overestimate not only how many goths there are in the world, but how big of a percentage of them actually care about YouTube videos and YouTube personalities. And once that realization kind of sets in that a lot of the traffic they're pulling aren't actually goths, then the content on their channel kind of reflects that, and you get a lot of stuff that isn't really interesting to goths.
Right.
Just my
so
view.
So it's like selling out in a way.
Yeah, kind of. I think there are certainly YouTubers who have done exactly that, and then some, not maybe not as consciously, but it's kind of, the platform has kind of steered them in that direction.
Yeah.
You have to be conscious of like what you're going into something for. What you have to have a good grounding in where your integrity is, what lines you won't cross, what your ethics of your product are. You have to kind of ask yourself the questions. If I'm doing something and I don't want to do advertisers, and an advertiser comes to me and says, "Hey, I'll give you $2,000 to advertise on my show," well, what is my response to that going to be? You have to think of these things ahead of time. Otherwise, you end up in situations you're not prepared for, and kind of end up with these kind of products that feel kind of skeezy, I guess is one way to put it.
I guess that's why we're not advertising like sex toys on our show.
Oh yeah.
Didn't we get an offer?
Yeah, lingerie was the thing.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone wants to see me model free lingerie though, so that might have been. So closing out here, what we have gathered here is that all three halls are dependent on mood. And again, I'm skipping through some of this, so if you want to read the full thing, click the link.
It's a big article, but it's really informative.
And they cite their sources too, which is nice. And they reference us, which is even better.
Yeah.
Consuming this type of media is not inherently detrimental to the scene, nor is creating it. All right, well, here we go. What needs to happen is both balance and transparency. Letting the viewer know about sponsored content should be in tandem with an honest opinion. There is no blame to be had on channels which appear materialistic, as it is the viewer's decision to choose what they intake. But being upfront as a creator is of the biggest importance. What perhaps is bothersome to those questioning the role halls have in the subculture is the lack of DIYing. Thrift halls, as expressed above, are not nearly as popular as your standard punk rave kill star or dolls kill hall. This has less to do with YouTubers and more to do with social media itself and the effect it has on users. So, Mark, do you buy that as an excuse? That it's just about the mood and the viewer, and it's okay if they...
Well, I do agree that, you know, there needs to be honesty and transparency. I definitely agree with that part. I mean, even though I don't personally like it, I can't really fault the YouTuber if there is at least an attempt to be transparent. Now, you know, going back to what we said earlier, the very act of doing hauls lends itself to some inherent dishonesty. But, you know, that's just kind of the catch-22, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to hauls completely. I wouldn't, if I had the power, I wouldn't just banish them from the internet. I think they do and can play a role in goth culture and identity construction. But I think the general fear, something that wasn't really talked about in this article, is that, so I guess if you compare, for example, on one end you have high fashion or music journalists that will write an article that says Taylor Swift is goth when she wears black lipstick.
Right.
If you compare that on one end to YouTube hauls, where with the YouTube hauls you have a goth, a cultural insider, promoting consumption of store-bought clothing, which, you know, the clothing of goth has meaning, like the semiotics of the aesthetics of goth have deep, important roots in the culture. But that's kind of ignored for the more surface level look of it. I think that is what people are afraid of, because that causes more confusion coming from a insider as opposed to like mainstream media culture, where you can say, oh yes, of course that's ridiculous.
Yeah, but you know, on the other hand, not everyone is able to DIY. Not everyone is really good at doing DIY, so like I can kind of understand why people may be drawn toward just the brands that sell that kind of clothing.
Right.
But I still think it should be something to aspire to, and it would really help for those, you know, maybe the YouTubers could buy that brand of clothing and then mod it, or, you know, do something, make it unique.
Yeah.
You know, incorporate some DIY into it.
Yeah, and that goes back to the whole depth thing, because like for on my end, like my interest is cultural, so when I look at these videos, what I see missing is any mention of how the style goth fashion has been relevant for so long, how it's evolved, how it grew hand in hand with the music, with art movements, with philosophy, how these signifiers have held their meaning over time, how they were used as identifiers in the 80s up till now. And, you know, but you can also, like the DIY stuff, that those other elements that are missing from these videos, I think is what's frustrating, because, you know, you could talk about how these big brand goth shops have made it easier for non-goths to look like us, and without kind of the commitment. And what does that mean for the culture? What does that mean for finding your identity, finding your crowd? What does it mean for the pricing model? How does that impact kind of goths and making it easier to get or harder to get? You know, there's all these other issues you could cover rather than just saying, here's a box of stuff, now look at me put it on. And I think that's where it's really frustrates me. And then the last little bit here says, in addition to the little amount of DIY, it seems that what goths fear most is the obliteration of the scene through the lack of exchange in terms of music, that the scene may cease to become a lived experience and instead be replaced by an online presence used as a barometer to determine participants' goth level. While hauls may give the impression of superficiality, it's mainly due to the fact that there is very little variety in terms of what the viewer consumes. If the three categories, brand hauls, informative hauls, and thrift hauls, were each highlighted equally, then perhaps the scene as it is now would feel more welcoming to those who can't afford even the basics. And yeah, I mean,
not to mention just, all the other aspects of goth culture that the YouTubers could be covering.
Right.
Like music and art and literature.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't have an exact ratio for, okay, what's the ratio of hauls on this YouTuber's channel to other stuff? But you can incorporate that other stuff into your haul video.
Right.
So, yeah.
Album review.
Just real quick, I have a very short update on the whole Second Life debacle I talked about last month.
Is it a debacle?
No. Yeah. So I got a bunch of feedback. I'm not going to talk about that. What I did get, though, the most interesting thing was, someone messaged me about the actual true goth club in Second Life that still exists. And it's called Club Zero. Wait, hang on. Is it? Yeah, Club Zero. And there was a bunch of juicy details in there too about like drama between clubs and like, oh yeah, that club is just full of bots and this club is super cliquey and you can't like, they're like, I DJ'd there for 5 years and it still took forever for me to get into the inner circle of whatever. So I went to this
kind
club,
of like real life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went to this club just right before the show because we're recording this pretty soon after the last episode was released and I haven't had a lot of time. But it was actually gave me some hope because it didn't if you remember how the other clubs looked, it didn't look like vampire freaks vomited into a virtual club. It was actually kind of classy. It looked really nice. They were playing good music, and I walked in and people started talking to me right away. I got added to like a private group chat, and there were I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of what I was looking for. So that said, my Second Life experiment will be continuing through the month as often as I can. I'm going to be hanging out at Club Zero for now. But if you have any other insider tips, feel free to send.
Which club were you at last time? Like during the last show, was that Club Zero or was that a different?
No, so I was mostly at Club End of Days, and then I stopped by Synthetic Bunker for a while. And both of them were not that great, and nobody talked to me, and they just looked awful. They looked like GeoCities website, just bad. So we'll find out. We'll find the secret goth cabal in Second Life and report back on it. Cemetery Confessions exclusive.
Yes, the listeners need to know. This is like really important.
All right, so let me see if I can pull up. Oh, no, I don't, because I don't have a bio for the band because it was all in French.
Oh, great.
This month, we're going to be reviewing the album New Control by the French band Dead Astropilots. And to kick it off, I'm going to play a song from the album, and that's going to be, I have it here, Inside a Dream. So, Mark, why don't you let us know what you thought of this?
I had never heard of them. Is this like a new band or?
They, I think this is their first album. This came out January 21st this year.
Okay.
On Manic Depression Records, and let me see if they have another. They have a no. Looks like they had a song on a Variety album. Either that or they had an EP. No, yeah. I think that's it. This is their only LP. They might have a newer EP, but I can't tell by the way this one's titled. So, but yeah, this is a newer band.
Okay. I guess I can go track by track. I was just curious. I was curious, like, if this was like a spin-off of Ladytron, or like, because it reminded me a whole lot of Ladytron.
Yeah, every time I tried to get into that band, I always bounced off of them. So I couldn't really make the comparison, but it makes sense in my head.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, track 1, was it Giallo or?
Yeah, let's call it Gelato.
Okay, Jello.
Yes.
I had that this was kind of like a hybrid of maybe like dark wave and post-punk. It had like spoken female vocals, kind of like maybe like a track from that Cellophane album.
Yeah, but not as good.
Right, yeah. I mean, I thought this was an okay track, but kind of weak. Track 2, Libertine Patrol. I thought this one just was like, I had that this was very much trying to sound like Ladytron. And I thought it was successful to a degree, but doesn't quite have the hook that Ladytron had. So track 3, Cities. I really liked this one. Had a really nice futuristic kind of vibe. Really good harmonies between the male and female vocalists. So yeah, that was a standout. Number 4 was Soul Beats. This was more of like a faster paced track. Had really nice arpeggiated synth bass and more spoken vocals, which, you know, I guess I'm not really a huge fan of just the spoken vocals.
Yeah, neither.
I mean, it can be used sparingly, but not for like several tracks. Okay, Inside a Dream. This was one of my favorite tracks on the album, and that's the one we just heard. I have that the vocal harmonies create an otherworldly ambience that complements the music nicely. So you can be the judge of that, I guess.
Yeah, the vocals were they were the worst part of this album for me.
Oh, really?
But I'll get to that in my review, I guess.
Number 6, Wild Fever. I thought this was kind of a continuation of track 5, almost. It kind of continues the hypnotic retro sci-fi vibe. Really, in my opinion, kind of a 1-2 punch. Tracks 5 and 6 are 2 of my favorites on the album. Number 7, Gimme Some. This track kind of reminded me of like the Dum Dum Girls. Have you heard them?
No.
It almost has like a California surf rock type vibe. You know, take it or leave it, I guess. I thought it was okay. I mean,
yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like some of that. Track 8, You Should Know. Again, trying to sound like Ladytron. A lot like track 2. Comes off as a little bit too simplistic, I think.
I had that problem with Go Home.
Yeah. Number 9, Go Home. This one is more guitar heavy, uses a little more distortion, but still packs a lot of energy. I mean, to their credit, that is one thing this album has almost like the whole way through. It's just like constant energy.
Yeah.
Except for track 10, which is like the only slower paced track. Quiet Nights Are Gone. Ironically, this one is quieter. Yeah. Probably the only slow song in the album. This one kind of reminded me of 6th June. Like, I had that all it needed is like a saxophone, and it could fit on Virgo Rising.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that song too. I like that it was different. And I like the direction they went with it.
Yeah, so I guess overall I'll give this like, I liked it overall, and I'll probably listen to it a few more times. I like the energy and kind of the futurism it kind of brings to mind, although there were a few tracks that were a little weaker. So I'll give it like a 3.75 out of 5.
All right, so for me, I felt like this album was almost like split down the middle, where the first half felt more like more along the electronica new wave side of things with a little ethereal. And the second half was where we introduced the guitars and there was more of the post-punk sound, which it made the album interesting, I guess. I thought Cities was a neat take on the synth pop genre. It had kind of that sound, but there was more emphasis on the pop side of it. But it still had some of the creative indie and new wave sounds mixed in there, which I think they did well through the whole album.
Right.
I wasn't a big fan of the vocals on it, though. And a lot of the female vocals on this album I just didn't think hit very well. Let's see. Soul Beats. What? Soul Beats. Soul Beats was, I thought, a decent ethereal goth club track. I could see myself dancing to it. Inside a Dream was really good. That's where we start introducing the more post-punk guitar and 80s synth sounds, but keeping this track specifically had that kind of poppy vocal to it, which I think it was both the guy and the girl singing, which was nice. Go Home I thought was not garbage, but I didn't think it was that good. I don't know, it just felt really repetitive to me, and the vocals I thought, again, for this song were too weak for the more aggressive kind of track, and it almost felt like they didn't go far enough with the aggression, that they stopped right before where it should have been, and that made it feel kind of awkward, kind of like a Nine Inch Nails ripoff band kind of thing. I don't know, that's just how it sounded to me. Overall, though, I did enjoy the record. The problem for me was more that it was just it was interesting, but it was more of a kind of middle of the road album, which isn't a bad thing. It wasn't a bad record. Some of the vocals were weak, which didn't help. That was my biggest problem with it. But the music was enjoyable. Some of the tracks I really did get into and did want to dance to, could see myself enjoying at a club. But overall, it ended up feeling more like something I would play in the background when I'm doing chores or trying to get other stuff done, rather than something I would want to really pay attention to. I think
it's good, like, exercise music or something, because there is a lot of energy in it.
Yeah, but still, the record's really solid. Not too much negative to say about it, and I think I'd give it a 3 out of 5 for me. So something has happened to my mouse where it has slowed down tremendously, and I don't know what is going on. All right, so what do we got? Listener feedback. So I don't know if this is going to be a recurring segment going forward. Again, we're still experimenting with this whole 2-episode format. We'll see how it goes. You guys, please send feedback specifically about how you like the format, what you want to see, what you don't like, because I want to continue tweaking it and give you guys what you want to listen to. But this email comes from Ren. Ren says, I just got finished with episode 18, but I listened to episode 47, so I wasn't responding to 2015 things in 2017. I can really connect with the Goth at 30 article because although I am still a few months short of turning 25,
I wish I was that young.
Long ago.
I know, yeah.
A combination of career choice. I studied a Bachelor of Arts in English, Literature, and History alongside a Bachelor of Secondary Education before realizing that I definitely didn't want to teach. And then undiagnosed mental illness led me to experience a 3-year normal person TM phase, to trademark
I've been through that.
After identifying as goth since I was 14. It's a really long story, but one thing I learned from being chronically ill is that life is too short to compromise my identity, especially since any facade of normality typically drops as soon as I start talking.
I think like this definitely isn't the first person that it's kind of interesting because like for a lot of people they will experience like maybe some kind of mental illness or something traumatic will happen, or something will lead to depression, and they'll go into like I guess a normal phase, and then when the mental health improves they'll go back to being a goth.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, all that, it stops. I mean, depending on what you're going through, of course. Some people have, for some people, it's a career thing or a kid thing or a, living with your parents thing.
Right.
But if you're dealing with depression specifically, you kind of stop caring about yourself.
It's like there's no motivation to even try or have any hope or enthusiasm about anything.
Yeah. I'm currently studying a Master of Public Health. God, sorry for all the coughing. So in the future, I can contribute to mental health policy and advocacy, and I'm currently volunteering as a mental health at a mental health hospital inpatient facility as an openly bipolar and work-appropriate goth. One of the most common things I see at the unit is people returning to the ward due to isolation or a negative environment. And I think that the work you do for the goth community is important for similar reasons. Yeah.
Well, I've always said, I'm glad that this show can reach people who are, don't necessarily have a scene near them or, have the access to support from other people in the scene.
Yeah. And I'm, in my response email, I said specifically, like, I thanked them for the work that they're doing because we need more people who actually care in hospitals, helping people that need help to get the help that they need. I might be becoming intimately familiar with inpatient care in the near future. So that that kind of thing. Probably. Yeah, that kind of thing really is important. And I would say, on the community part of it, that, I mean, it's important for people who struggle with mental illness to have a community, but I think it's just as or more important for people in the community, in the goth community, to have an understanding of what those people go through so that they can help. And because when they don't, sometimes what you see is it makes it worse because someone who is dealing with a mental illness will, people will, once they find out, they'll care. But then a few months later and a year later and a couple years later, they're like, I don't care anymore. I need to get on with my life. They see it as this person is dragging me down. And I don't want to spend time with them. I don't want to help them, which is their right. But often what that does is reinforce those kind of negative thoughts of the person feeling like I am a burden on other people. I am, I'm not good
and
enough.
I mean, like, mental illness isn't like a common cold that goes away in a couple days.
Yeah. So I think the education around that and the encouraging compassion around that is really important and something that I think we should be doing in the goth community.
Definitely.
I find that going to my local gothy night in Brisbane, Australia helps me. We seem to have tons of listeners in Australia. I don't know or maybe they're just the only ones that write in, but it's like every other message I get is like, hey, I'm in Australia.
I think they should send us money so we can get on a plane and visit them.
Yeah.
I would like to go to Australia.
Live recording, live from Australia.
Yes.
My local gothy night helps me feel as if I am at home, as I can interact with people on my own terms. It did take a long time for me to feel comfortable arriving at the club with no guarantee that I would know anyone there, as being one of the few women at the club on a quiet night, which is 8 to 10 people. would lead to general misunderstandings when I just wanted to dance. I'm hopefully working on actually talking to some of the regulars because it seems a little silly not to.
Especially when there's 8 to 10 people. I mean, it's almost you have to talk because, you know.
And I think we've talked about this in episodes past, but one thing that was really helpful to me in regards to going to clubs and feeling anxious or feeling obligated to make friends or whatever is just to say
alcohol.
Like, well, not just that, but like, don't feel that you are obligated to anyone other than yourself. And if you go, that's all that matters, is that you went. If you end up talking to somebody, you don't talk to somebody, you have a conversation ends awkwardly and you kind of try to avoid each other for the rest of the night, something like that, don't let it get to you. Just congratulate yourself for doing the thing. And as you do it more, that stuff gets easier and you do get into circles. And, you know, so if you're kind of a first timer or you just feel uncomfortable, don't feel bad about going and just sitting in a corner all night. Like, that's fine. People just want you to be there.
Yeah, take in the music, take in the ambience, take in the alcohol if you want.
Yeah.
But, you know, years ago, back before I started, you know, drinking heavily, I would just go and just dance and sit and experience the music and enjoy the fact that I'm in a public place that doesn't have shitty bar rock music or country music or, you know, somewhere that actually has really good music in a public setting.
I also really enjoy the Reddit Discord, which I'm not on anymore. I was in there for a little bit, but I just couldn't keep up with it. But I'm glad you're enjoying that, especially conversations with Fairy Gothma Jez. I find that although the elitist label is used sometimes to describe the group, it's a very supportive place if a person has actually taken time to learn about the goth culture. I wanted to thank you again for all the time that you take to make the podcast, especially when raising a family. Regards, Ren. So, Ren, thanks for that email. I appreciate it. I think, there's a lot of resources out there for if you're looking to get involved in a community that are not shitty Facebook groups. And if you need suggestions, you know, always feel free to contact me. I can point you in a few different directions. But yeah, I'm glad Reddit Discord is great. All right, we're going to close out with Sinister Suggestions.
So you've got to be interested in death. It's the last great taboo. It's the only taboo left.
Precisely. I mean, why is it, do you think, that everyone in here is dressed in black? It's a celebration of death.
No, I just like the clothes.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, the clothes look good. Yeah, I mean, death looks good. Charles Manson, yeah? No, he was cool.
Don't know if I mentioned it before, but I'm actually a vampire.
Sinister Suggestions.
The return of Sinister Suggestions.
It's back, bitch. All right, so my Sinister Suggestion this month is a bit of an interesting one. I'm recommending a book, even though most of my free time has been video games the last couple weeks. Well, at least the happy times. The book I'm recommending is titled... Oh no, what is it titled?
Grimoire.
Oh wait, do I have it written down?
You have it written down.
Grimoire for the Apprentice Wizard, and this book is the first of two, written by Oberon Zell Ravenheart, a wizard. And the book, so there's two parts to this. The book itself is, if you're looking to get into a paganism or witchcraft or Wicca or any kind of eclectic, weird, esoteric, not weird, but esoteric religion, philosophy, belief system, this is a great place to start. It was funny enough, it was recommended to me by Gothic Graveyard, which is like feels really meta. That they're making it onto the show in this way. But it's a great book. The guy who wrote it has been involved in the community since he was a kid, and like he says he coined the term paganism for the modern day. I don't know if that's true or not, but He's he kind of looks like Gandalf, and actually the book has a lot of references to. It's kind of written like what a Hogwarts book would be, and it's got a lot of references to like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So it's kind of meant to be a kind of fun pop culture introduction, but it has all of the stuff there that you would need to know to start with whatever you're looking to do. And he's I guess like in the 60s they were breeding unicorns, which were, because he's really into magical creatures, but the unicorns were basically goats with one horn, because you can like manipulate when they're born, they have the two nubs, and you can manipulate those to push them to the center, and then it'll grow as one big horn. But he's got
is that ethical? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, they use them in the circus, so probably especially
probably not. No.
But he's got the Grey School of Wizardry, which, funny enough, has its campus in Second Life. To call back to that, where there's like 30 professors, and you pay like $7 a month, and they give you homework, and they basically take you on your journey to become a wizard.
So this is in Second Life, and it's still going.
They do have I think he still has a commune, or at least like his own shop, like a Wicca shop. But I don't know what state that's in. They do have a Second Life thing though for people that don't live near there. You may be asking yourself, Count, all you do is talk about how you're an atheist and God is dead and ghosts aren't real, and it really bothers me because that's all you talk about on this podcast. That's supposed to be about goth stuff.
So what we're talking about next episode.
Why are you recommending Wicca? Oh yeah, that's true. I kind of came to this in a weird roundabout way. So I'm still an atheist, but for a long time I've been interested in seeing posts from my friends who were doing like full moon rituals where they were, charging their crystals and lighting incense and doing these cool rituals that looked calming, and they looked kind of goth, and it was pretty cool. And I'm really into fantasy stuff, so that was appealing. But I just couldn't get past the whole, like, being an empiricist, the woo of healing with crystals. I just couldn't. I was like, I cannot.
You needed to see the science behind it.
Well, there isn't any. So I haven't changed my opinion on like energy or like crystal healing or homeopathy or any of that stuff. What I have come around on, though, is just that what I was finding in the practices and the ritual practices was a lot of stuff that they do in like mindfulness meditation. So I was looking into meditation for a while because to help my wife cope with depression, and like other practices for stress release and for being focusing on the moment and being present and that kind of thing. But the problem with meditation is it has been shown to reduce stress and to help with depression. But the thing is, with any of these practices, they have to be a nearly daily thing. They have to be something that you take time out of your day to do. And they have to be something that you enjoy, which sounds kind of dumb. Like, why would you do something you don't enjoy? But with meditation or yoga or reading books or whatever, people will try this stuff because they've been told it helps with something, but they don't actually like it. And if you don't like it, it's going to have the opposite effect. And what we were finding with meditation was, like, we wouldn't do it. We'd stop taking time because it was just kind of boring and it was hard, and it was
becoming a chore, I guess.
Yeah, it wasn't
something you had to check off a list.
Yeah, and then what I was finding with the rituals and stuff is there's a lot of, they talk about you do things with intention and you focus on what you're, for different reasons, for energy reasons and these, spiritual reasons. But a lot of it revolves around being present, focusing on how you want to be, what you want to change about yourself, how you want to behave. But it's all wrapped up in this not just cool fantasy element, but this this thing that's been around since before Christianity. And as someone who is now no longer part of a church or anything, I do in a way kind of miss those spiritual practices and that kind of community, and the kind of ritual of it. And with something like paganism or Wicca or whatever tradition you want to get into, there is that richness of history. There is that kind of esoterica and like obscure, I don't know, I can't think of the words, but if for me, it helped me feel connected to something bigger than myself, something outside of myself, which is really kind of a deep part of human psyche, part of why religion is so relevant, because people want to feel like they have meaning and that they're part of something bigger than themselves.
They want that experience, that
yeah,
kind of enlightened, I guess, state.
Yeah, and it's like a it's like a connection to the past, to how the first our kind of first attempts at science, trying to understand nature, feeling connected to nature. Even, they have the Wheel of the Year, which was like an old calendar for a way to honor the gods and goddesses and count, what seasons were coming. It's not very scientific
like
anymore.
Cross of the Zodiac, I guess.
Yeah. And with modern science understanding, it's not accurate, but it's part of that tradition of trying to understand where you are and feeling connected to nature around you. And I'm not necessarily using it as a philosophy. Some people do. A lot of the stuff with deities and things are more representational and about connecting my thoughts purposefully with themes and personifications of emotions and psychology that is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, I have to kind of go through this stuff and kind of throw out a lot of the spiritualism and things. But there's, I found a real nice balance between cool gothy, like I'm going to be burying something under the full moon. Now, do I believe that the full moon is going to charge that thing with mystical energy? No. But burying something in the dirt under a full moon is pretty fucking goth.
It's kind of,
right? So
it has a very nice aesthetic to it.
And then the idea of having a altar with a bunch of pagan symbols at the front door where my parents will walk in and see it and freaking them the fuck out is also pretty appealing.
Of course. So
if you are interested in, and I don't know how helpful this recommendation is, because either you don't care or you already know. But if you're just kind of starting out, or you're interested in getting some information on paganism, witchcraft, or wizardry, check out the Grimoire for the Apprentice Wizard. And that's it. Did you have anything you want to recommend, Mark? Or are you still in? I know it was like 2 weeks ago the last time we did.
It's been so long for me. All that's been in my brain is moving and dealing with stress. So
have you heard any new music? You just listening to old stuff, or no music at all?
I guess just old stuff for the time being. Probably starting next month, now that I'm moved and starting to settle down again, I'll start doing monthly audio album reviews.
Okay.
As well as my DJing, The Catacombs, it will return.
Yes. Oh God. I'm going to start posting, because I don't have time to make episodes. I'm going to start posting classic episodes, since I've got 10 years of back catalog.
Yeah, we've got a huge archive.
So Mark, thanks for, you're not my guest. I don't have to thank you.
Yeah, I'm just the dude.
Thanks, dude. All right. Before we go, we actually received a voicemail from Ren, whose email we just read. And the voicemail came in after we recorded the episode. So I wanted to make sure to get this in and give a quick response. So here you go.
Hi, this is Ren. ATAC suggested that I send a voice message, so if this is terrible, you know who to blame. I wanted to thank you and Mark for your dedication to producing Cemetery Confessions, and your contribution to the Gothic community overall. I listened to the suggested show outline for this year, and I noticed that you were interested in revisiting the Goth and mental illness episode. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you don't mind a suggestion for a future episode. If possible, creating an episode about disabled or differently abled Goths would be really insightful and would emphasize inclusivity within the Goth community. I know from personal experience I have to find a way to make my makeup and hairstyle and club attendance compatible with my chronic illness. Especially simple things like trying to achieve the perfect winged eyeliner, or more complicated things like trying to maintain a Deathhawk shade with a safety razor and a mirror. I don't recommend the second thing with shaky hands. You end up with a little less hair than you originally planned. I'd be very interested in hearing from other disabled Goths, so I really do hope you'd actually take up this idea. And finally, I just want to say congratulations on making it to 4 years, and stay dark.
Ren, another great suggestion I did bring up in one of the Patreon videos when I cover the episodes that we're going to be doing for the year, what kind of topics and guests we're having on, that this was an issue I wanted to explore again, specifically mental illness, because my understanding and experience in that arena has changed a lot over the last year. But talking about differently abled Goths would also, just beyond maybe depression or anxiety and that kind of thing, would make for a really interesting episode. So I do have one empty slot at the end of the year. I had some ideas to fill that, but this might fit in nicely. If you have had experience as a differently abled Goth or dealing with chronic illness and trying to participate in the Goth scene, and you either would be interested in coming on for an episode to talk about that, or maybe would be too nervous to do a live recording, but rather would like to kind of sit down and record your own thoughts and send that to me as an audio file, please let me know. cemeteryconfessions@gmail.com. If we get enough interest and I can find people who want to participate, I think that would make for a really interesting episode, and I'll continue to look into that as well myself. So before we end this episode, I will let you guys know what's coming up at the end of the month for the next podcast. I'm really, really excited about that one, and I'm excited about the guests that we have coming on for the following episodes. I'm not going to let that drop yet, but we've got we have some well-known musicians coming on, and some other people that I think will be a pleasant surprise. So before I get into that, I'd like to thank our Patreon members, of course. If you have yet to check out the Patreon page, I recently did a full revamp of not just the look of the page, but the rewards. And so I've added some rewards. There's going to be a monthly live stream that I'm going to commit to. We've added some, as of this recording, I think we should have added the merchandise giveaways specifically for the founders level and above. We'll be getting merch like shirts and mugs and stickers every 3 months. I've got some cool exclusive designs for that that should be going out. There's going to be a brand new video on the Patreon page as well, kind of explaining all this. So if you want to take a look at the now easier to read and more concise and expanded Patreon page, go to patreon.com/cemeteryconfessions. I talk about what we've been able to accomplish and why we need your support, because the show exists. The safety and stability of the show is reliant on Patreon. And if that goes away, the show goes away, and I don't think any of us want to see that happen. So founder level donations for January are Luna, Esmeralda, and Abigail. Thank you so much for your continued support. At the Nocturnal Council level, we have Kyra, Natalie, Michelle, Ariel of Ariel Wolf's Art Pieces, Azzy, Michelle of Skullgirdle, Thomas, Trey, Nephilim of Nephilim and Corruptus on YouTube, Angela, Ivy, Skiamakos K, who has put out their own website, goth.life. You should check that out. And Heather. At the Crow's Call level, we have Isabel, Rabin, Angela, Benedict of YouTube fame, Sarah, Christina, Esther, Ambergeddon, Jillian Venters of Gothic Charm School, Nora, Emma, Dolly, Paula, Joe, DJ ATAC, Kelly, Dom, Noir, Elizabeth, Marco, David, Stewart, Isabel, Christian, Fifth Dream, Alex Kennedy of the I Die You Die podcast called We Have a Technical, Shelley, Caroline of the Gothic Amino app, Rose, Eternal, Winter, another YouTuber you should check out, Bronwyn, Angel, Anne, Heather, Honora, Laurel, Jen, Joseph, Beth, Lennon, and Lyrillith. And if you have a project you are working on within the Gothic community that I forgot to mention, please send that my way. I'd like to credit you guys and point the listeners to all the cool stuff that our community is making, because there is a lot of it, and it's worth checking out. Thank you all so much for supporting the show and keeping us alive, or undead, rather. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be back with an episode about the Christian Goth community. Mark, myself, and 2 other guests will be on, all of which were involved in or with leadership or tangentially or participated in, all of us really for a long time, the Christian Goth subculture, as it were. And we're going to be talking about our experiences, how that community relates to broader Goth culture, what the kind of tension there is, and what the crossover and drama as relates to our personal experiences. So that one is in the bag. If you're on the Patreon page, you have access to that. We did a live stream. Great episode. I'm really looking forward to putting it out. So thank you for hanging out with us. Until next time, stay dark.
The preceding program is a member of The Belfry, a network of blogs, podcasts, and videos for the darkly inclined. Go to thebelfry.rip for more information.